So I think that absurd is definitely the right term to describe this story and the author's style. Um, so this first question, what's this story trying to say? I think in order to look at that, we need to look at the actual content of the story. And the second question, I think these two are connected regarding escalation and the message of the story. I think these two things are tied together. So I'm actually going to talk about escalation first. The story escalates by obviously going from small things dying, or not small things, but things that we can't really form a human connection to, such as trees. So it starts with trees dying and then goes to snakes and then gerbils and fish and puppies and grandparents and parents and then other classmates. There's a huge escalation in obviously the level of closeness to the characters and to us as individuals, as humans, that these things that are dying have. Obviously we're not going to have a strong emotional connection to a tree, but the idea of a person being murdered in a home invasion or a parent is, going to elicit a much more emotional, visceral reaction. And one thing that's very odd to me about that is as these things die, you would expect the characters to have emotional reactions to that. And maybe they are, and it's just not being talked about by the narrator, but that's pretty significant to me, is that as these things die, there's no mourning them. Like the puppy dies and it's replaced by a different thing, and the snakes die and they're replaced by gerbils, and the gerbil dies and is replaced by fish. And it's like everything that dies and is removed from these children's life, brings them so much joy when they're alive, because you see that the children are overjoyed every time something comes in, as demonstrated by the end when a new gerbil comes into the class and the children are cheering wildly. They are brought so much happiness by these new living things that are introduced to them that they can interact with and care for and form connections to, but there's no sadness when they die. There's no acknowledgement of the life that's been lost. Regardless of if it's a plant or if it's a family member, there's no acknowledgement of the children's feelings besides maybe something is wrong with the school. And so that's significant to me. And so the escalation there is made even more significant, I think, by the fact that there is no negativity acknowledged. There's no emotional escalation besides the reaction it elicits in the reader. Because theoretically, these children are reacting the same to every single thing. There's no difference in the description of their reaction to their dead trees and dead snakes than to their dead classmates. The only real conversation that they have about this stuff is at the very end, and I think that this is where that first question, what is this story trying to say, really comes into play. So the children and the teacher talk about life giving meaning to life versus death giving meaning to life, and this is kind of funny to me because the teacher argues that life gives meaning to life, and we see that exemplified here in the story when the children rejoice over the gerbil and they play with the puppy and they love these things. They love these living things, and their lives are enhanced and they're brought happiness by these things. So you could argue that yes, the teacher is right, because the experiences that other living things give them, as well as the experiences they have while they're alive, like the joy that they feel and the things that happen in their day-to-day basis, that's what gives life meaning. But the children are out here arguing that isn't death considered a fundamental datum? Isn't death like a fundamental fact of life, and therefore the fact that we're going to die means that death gives meaning to life? Because we're living on borrowed time, we're living on a time limit here. We have to make the thing that makes every day not mundane, the thing that takes away that mundanity of the everyday, is the fact that our days are limited. That's really interesting to me that the children argue that, because they don't care when things die, or maybe they do and it's just not described. But there's no significant acknowledgement of death. There's this intellectual discussion of it here, but there's no discussion of the actual emotional impact. And I don't really know how to address that last segment of the story where they're saying, can you make love with Helen because we've never seen it happen, this is an educational experience. that's interesting because death in this story is treated as an educational experience, but the idea of making love, creating life, death and life going hand in hand, they're saying no, it's never a demonstration, or almost never done as a demonstration. That's interesting because theoretically these children are learning from all the deaths. They learn not to put gerbils in pockets. They learn not to overwater plants. They don't learn what it is to create life, only to take it away. And so it says there's maybe something a little bit voyeuristic about the whole idea of learning from death, but we can't learn from, I don't know. It's just really odd to me. I don't really know what I think of it or how to think of it. But there's something significant about that ending paragraph. Yeah.